So welcome to the Equity and Safe Routes to School panel. And yeah, it's nice to see everyone's faces, and you can see at the top, I think, all the panelists here. So my name is Beth Martin. I'm a planner with Alta Planning Design and will be moderating today. And just a shout out and thank you to all the amazing organizers at SCDC for putting together this year's Bike Summit. What a feat, I'm very impressed. And I'm really excited to introduce this panel of people that I've gotten to work with in different capacities over the last couple of years and really respect the work that they do. Just so for a little bit of background and context, obviously equity within Safe Routes to School is such a wide topic, but overall looking at how within our work, we're prioritizing the mobility needs of underserved students. So low-income students, students of color, recent immigrants, students with disabilities, just to name a few. And, as the panelists and I have been talking about, this is obviously, the topic has been so amplified in this time of global pandemic when obviously all these economic disparities have been heightened, and there's this mainstream conversation about how Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, people of color, as well as trans people are regularly being policed and harassed in the built environment. And obviously that's very salient for how young people get to school. I just wanted to add, talking to James Rojas earlier, he had a really good reminder that it can be important to think about equity as an action, emotion, and a lived experience, even though as planners, we often want to kind of categorize it as just an approach. So our panelists today are going to talk about equity and Safe Routes to School through a bunch of different ways, conducting health equity assessments, creating authentic youth engagement spaces, and overall starting to think about how to break down barriers to accessing Safe Routes to School for a diversity of students and families. So just to get us started, I wanted the folks who are here to think about how equity and anti-oppression lens, how does it fit within the conversations that are happening as part of your work? And how is it embedded, how is that equity framework embedded within the organization that you're a part of? So Kim, could you help me load that poll? Although maybe I have access to loading it too. Okay, so you should see it on your screen. How does the organization implement an equity framework within their work? Not at all, a little, a lot, all the time. It's fully baked into the work you do. I don't know, or maybe not applicable to you. We'll just give it a few seconds. Just want to get people back from lunch, thinking about the topic and maybe just getting a little context to the panelists. All right, so I'm going to show, I think we have, let's see, almost 80 people who have responded. I'm going to end it and just show results so that people can see. Share results. So just for other people to see who's in the room and what's happening at their organization. So you can see, almost everyone is having at least a little bit of conversations within their work, and a small percentage, indicates that it's fully baked in. So this is great. It's kind of, I think I assumed that it would be kind of a range within people's different work, and hopefully this forthcoming discussion will get us all thinking about a few other different tools that we can bring back to deepen these discussions. So without further ado, I'd love to quickly introduce all the panelists before I turn it over to them. And maybe you all can just kind of wave when I introduce you. So we have James Rojas, who's a community activist, artist, planner, and founder of the company Placeit. We have Joelle Alley, who's the program director at Earth Team, which does some really incredible experiential education for high school youth. We have Vanessa Castro, who's a Safe Routes to School project specialist at San Mateo County Office of Education, and Jose Palma, who's a Safe Routes to School coordinator with the City of Palo Alto. So packed agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to James Rojas to get started. And actually, sorry, I'll turn it over to James, and just one reminder that if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box, and we'll return to all of them at the end during the Q&A session. Thank you. All right, James, rolling it over to you. I think you're muted,
Yeah.
James.
Hi, I'm James Rojas, and the way I go about equity is having people look at living being and self-awareness, so students can understand, how their bodies exist in spaces at the first level of understanding themselves and their community. So I do a lot of really creative community engagement that looks at looks at emotion and empowerment for youth, and a lot of it is about a lot of it is about getting kids to think differently about the environment around them. Can you switch the slide? Change it. Let's see. So we can get this going. Okay, so yeah, so it's a really simple approach. It's hands-on. It's 50 to 60 minutes long. It can be done in a classroom. It's easy to facilitate using objects and prompts, and help students to understand themselves and their relationship to the environment around them. And it really kind of humanizes the mobility experience. We were talking about their feelings, their emotions, as a way to understand the city. Next slide. And I use objects because objects help students expand their thinking, and it helps them think about their emotions and intuitive knowledge of a space based on how they feel about it. And objects are kind of the best way to do that because it really kind of touches into their creativity and using a lot of they get you a lot of their brain. Next slide. Okay, so I use simple prompts of build your first mobility experience, probably great for two to eighth graders, or else for younger people. What do you like? What younger students? What do you like to do in the city? Next slide. Next, and then students build for 7 to 10 minutes, and just through the building process, they unlock personal knowledge through these objects and their senses, memories, and aspirations. They discover their attachment to place in the environment. They discover why their voice matters, and they realize that they're the experts in their own environment. Next. So by seeking objects, you give students a wide variety of tools to choose from, and also a lot of options and how to really create the world. Next. And then, so what they do, just an example of a kindergarten class and building what they like to do in the city. Next. And then either older students are kind of building what they want is how they want to see the city. Next. And then, so after that, or after the time is up, between 7 and 10 minutes, everybody presents. They present what they want. They present their memory, their first mobile experience, and their ideas. So then everybody has a say so in this whole process. Next. And then so what happens is these students are transforming their ideas and their thoughts and emotions into negotiable reality. This model here, the person was creating her bike route from home to work. She wanted to see trees on her bike route, from home to work. So people can actually start thinking that these things being real and negotiable. Next. And then people build, they build what they know. A lot of students never realize they know what they know until they build it. Next. And then people begin it. Just the part two, the collaborative part. People learn together and how their ideas impact each other, and how important it is to have gender and race in one group. This also nurtures community, and there's no wrong way to answer. Just how our ideas impact each other. Next. So they build their ideal walk to school together. Next. And then each team presents for 1 or 2 minutes. Next. And then they build together, and they're next. You document a picture of the notes. Next. So what people say about it, they have funny, creative, and you'd have fun. You understand the way planning works, and understand different vision. Next. Next. So the outcomes are they use more brain capacity, they're more critical thinkers, their personal skills are increased, they have empathy and civic literacy. Next. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, James. Yeah, it's great to get a little highlight of the approach that you use. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Joelle Alley, who's going to talk a little bit about our work at Earth Team.
Great. I think everyone can hear me, and we'll see if I can figure out control of my presentation of the screen. Great. Okay, so my name is Joelle Alley. I'm the program director at Earth Team. I am going to talk today a little bit about the ways that we amplify youth voice in our programs. Our work spans from watershed restoration to work specifically with air quality, human health, and active transportation. So I'll be talking a little bit about our general program and a little bit about our air quality program. So Earth Team just celebrated 25 years. We were established in 1994 as an organization committed to providing after-school environmental education to kind of support teachers who are often overworked and under-resourced. Our students work with partners in their community on hyperlocal projects, so they have direct engagement with the work that they're doing, and they're using this kind of wealth of data, especially now as our students are more and more comfortable, using technology. They have this ability to find kind of global data and use it to their advantage. Our mission is to empower urban youth to become lifelong environmental stewards through experiential education, skills development, and the building of community connections. So some of the most important ways that we amplify youth voice in our program is by including youth interests and perspectives in our actual planning process. I think starting from planning is a really critical way to make sure that your programs are actually serving the audiences that you're aiming to serve. So we collect student surveys at the end of every year to assess strengths and weaknesses. We invite students to planning meetings with partners. A lot of the times when we're coming up with documents, either assessments or outreach documents, we'll have alumni volunteers or current students read it to make sure that it's something that they would, actually relate with. And a really important part is to build in flexibility in your program so that you actually can deliver if you promise to include youth perspectives. So if you're going to ask students what they want to work on and what they care about, it's really critical to build in that flexibility from the beginning so it's not an empty promise. Another kind of critical part of prioritizing youth voice is by setting the stage for a safe and brave space where students feel like they can be vulnerable and honest. Part of that comes from team building. So we really emphasize social emotional learning at the beginning of the year, focus on building trust not only between students and mentors, but between students and themselves, because high school is a really tough place and it can be really hard for students to feel safe being vulnerable around their peers. And it's just really critical to continue to listen to students throughout the process. Another thing that we found is really successful in sort of fostering students' voices is using like a scientific process in our program by teaching students how to kind of see a program through asking questions, making hypotheses, collecting data. It gives them tools to understand their thoughts and to put their thoughts into actions. So it encourages like student-led process, and it also really increases students' efficacy as far as STEM careers and post-secondary education. And then youth-led outreach is a really, really critical component of our program because it not only benefits students because they're developing these like social and interpersonal skills, it's also incredibly effective because youth are the ones experiencing transportation systems. A lot of the times they're busing, biking, walking to school. They have really unique new perspectives on the challenges that we face, and they're the ones who are part of these communities that are the goal of outreach activities, so they really understand how to be effective communicators. I had an example of a public speaking game where you basically have all the students brainstorm words that they shouldn't say when they're public speaking, and then give them like silly topics to talk about, and they have to go up in front of the class or the group and talk for 1 to 2 minutes, and it's really funny, and it usually goes in really funny directions. And then kind of a final piece of amplifying youth voice is actually putting it into practice. So we like to invite our students to city council meetings or public presentations, science symposia, where they'll have the chance to really hold space as leaders in this community of environmental justice or sustainable transportation. It serves a lot of different benefits. So students are kind of they're validated in the work that they've been doing. And they get to practice public speaking, but it also offers an opportunity for policymakers and decision makers to hear perspectives from community and youth leaders. That's a really unique opportunity. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about COVID-19 considerations and what we experienced. So we switched all of our meetings to virtual on March 17th. And what we found was that it's really critical in this kind of tumultuous time to spend more time than we did even before prioritizing social emotional well-being and making sure that students have a safe place to interact with each other. And students really enjoyed it because they were feeling isolated for the most part, and it gave them a chance to connect with one another. And I'm out of time, and these are just some photos of our happy students. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Joelle. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa Castro and talk about her work at San Mateo County Office of Education.
Hey, Beth.
Oh,
I think it might be Jose next.
okay. Yeah, let's turn it over to Jose. So Jose, I think you said your video isn't working, but maybe you can still walk us through your presentation and work with the City of Palo Alto.
Right. Hey, everybody. My name is Jose Palma. I'm a Safe Routes to School coordinator with the City of Palo Alto. Happy to be here. This is Lost in Translation: Obstacles for Accessing Safe Routes to School Information. There's not a link, but if you want to follow more about Safe Routes to School, visit cityofpaloalto.org/saferoutes. Next slide, please. Within the City of Palo Alto, there is a local community partnership between the city, Palo Alto Unified School District, and the Parent Teacher Association. The partnership's mission is to reduce the risk to students en route to and from schools and encourage more families to choose healthy, active, sustainable alternatives driving to school more often. The City School Transportation Safety Committee brings together all the people listed on this slide, and the other coordinator and I help facilitate monthly meetings to inform the committee regarding city and school updates and upcoming programs. We also review, update policy, and discuss engineering projects. Next slide, please. Believe it or not, Palo Alto has low-income immigrant working families living within the city. PAUSD identifies students who come from these groups as historically underrepresented students and low socioeconomic statuses. Students, based on the English Learning Advocacy Committee, or ELAC 2019 report, out of 12,000 PAUSD students, there are about 1,300 English learning students, and about 6% of those students live in Palo Alto. The rest live in East Palo Alto. Interestingly enough, there's a misconception that most of the minority students who attend PAUSD are from East Palo Alto. However, this is not correct. The voluntary transfer program that brings East Palo Alto students to Palo Alto School is a result of a desegregation case, a civil rights lawsuit. I encourage the audience to read more about it through the Palo Alto Weekly Online. Essentially, the program allows for Ravenwood students to transfer out of the Ravenwood School District and into the PAUSD and other school districts in the peninsula. Over the last few years, Safe Routes to School and the VTP have worked together to ensure that more VTP students consider biking and walking to and from school. To do this, the Walking Roadmap was created to help students and parents understand suggested routes from East Palo Alto to schools in Palo Alto. A few years ago, injury involving a VTP student on a bike spurred the creation of the map. In order to reach all these students, the school district's Student and Family Engagement Program, or SAFE program, does outreach to help support racial minorities, lower income families, and families with language barriers. The city staff acknowledges that the SAFE program is an opportunity not only to engage with these students, but also provide a chance to connect with them and educate their parents. Next slide, please. Okay, we are not above criticizing our own material and our work. We developed these materials with Alta Planning and Design several years ago, and we're always striving for improvement. I mention this because from my experience, I have found that there are Spanish speakers who are not able to read or have low literacy skills. Thus, even if we have all this translated material, students and families who are English learners will not be able to understand the content. The nodding head is a typical response that I sometimes get from my own mother when she says she understands what I'm explaining, but I stop and gently ask her if she knows what specific transportation words mean, like bike lane or overcrossing. She usually admits that she does not understand what I'm saying, and then I explain a bit further on what that means. I had a similar situation when I did a school site assessment in Oakland, which had Spanish-speaking mothers. It was also the first time a Spanish speaker like myself could translate in real time not only the information about safe routes to school, but also have a genuine conversation about traffic safety hotspots. I slowly noticed that the mothers who spoke only Spanish were nodding their heads when other members spoke in English. But once I was able to chat with them exclusively in Spanish, mothers and build a rapport with them, they were not only able to understand me, but also detail some more driving behavior missed in previous discussions. Additionally, it's important to note that that Spanish vocabulary is not the same in every Spanish-speaking country. For example, sidewalks and buses might have different meanings in parts of the world or the country. For example, Mexico and Colombia have different meanings for sidewalk that would be missed through Google Translator. To avoid this, consider working with nonprofits and other school programs that work with immigrant families to ensuring that material that you are developing is appropriate and using the right words. Again, even a flyer that translates to perfection, there will still be families who cannot read it. This applies to reading and understanding a map. How can we improve this? Ensure that graphics are visible. A picture or a video and how to use a protected bike lane reaches a person further than just a definition. This effort will help in having a conversation with Spanish speakers. And then the idea of learning by doing might be the best tool you have for the concept to sink in. Next slide, please. Shelter in place has been the challenge and the test for all of us in Safe Routes to School and planning. For example, most families in Safe Routes, in the SAFE program have an issue connecting with children laptop to Wi-Fi routers and have trouble navigating websites for information or online education. As well, we have all experienced Zoom has been more important now to connect and share information, which allows us to practice safe social distancing. Yet some families are not able to connect online. And as a Safe Routes School staff, that is a challenge because we are not able to share biking and walking information related to shelter in place that would be helpful to support community wellness. Here's an example towards to the right. The images from San Mateo County Department of Education flyer stating safe during shelter in place, which is available both in English and Spanish. As mentioned before, there are parents who are not able to read information that is available in the flyer. Thus, these graphics help to ensure that families understand what social distancing is and what walking, when it comes to walking and biking. As well as we all have heard, there are ethnic groups that have higher prevalence of certain chronic diseases, which reduces their likelihood of surviving COVID. Thus, communication like these are a gateway to health, and also infrastructure projects that make it safer to walk and bike in their neighborhoods will help increase the chance of beating COVID. So dust off your bikes and get moving. Next slide, please. How can transportation practitioners build better relationship with historically underrepresented communities? First, make sure you have the material and vocabulary are appropriate. Second, build a relationship with the school outreach programs or nonprofits to develop rapport with these communities. Third, Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. When doing outreach and talking to families and asking them to share what they have learned and with you and their neighbors. So yeah. And fourth, another way is for populations to understand Safe Routes to School concept is to learn by doing. For example, showing a video about various types of helmets and how to properly fit will go a long way compared to just giving out a flyer. Finding the right combination will not only get you a yes or no response, it might give you more information than you might have otherwise received. Ultimately, our goal is to help ensuring understanding Safe Routes to School's concept so that they are empowered enough to retain and pass that information along to their families and friends. Now, next slide, if I have time, I will be answering asking a few questions to my guest, Christian Munoz, who is from Safe Representative. And yeah, Christian, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so the first question is, what is the best way to reach out to families who have limited English skills during shelter in place or who might not have access to online resources?
Yeah, so we actually use something called Blackboard, which is very effective in translating information or sending out information in 2 languages or multiple languages. I really like the text option. I like to embed a tiny URL link that will link to a Google Doc that is shared. And I make sure to include a lot of pictures. My communication is very visually focused. So I use a lot of logos, highlighter. I'll I'll use italics or highlight something in red if I really need to draw attention to it. But the pictures really do a lot of the communication on my behalf. The other thing that we do is we make personal phone calls or personal text, just because, you know, families are busy and you might be catching them at a wrong time and you don't want to be intrusive. So a text is really a soft way of engaging them and having them, you know, bring you back when they have time.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. How can practitioners in transportation field address a cultural bias towards driving? Is buying a car a status symbol of success?
Yeah, I would say so. A lot of the immigrant communities that I work with, you know, buying a home is not really an option right now. So having a car that you worked for and you paid off and you take care of it, it really is kind of like your status symbol, your class symbol. It kind of shows something that you earned and you're proud of and you want to show off. So attaining a car really is something that is valued because it is kind of like the freedom of independence and something that, you know, you can attain. So yeah, there is a bias towards owning a car versus, say, public transportation, which might seem like if you don't have money and something that you're struggling, you know, because you can't afford your own transportation. So there is that cultural bias.
Great. Beth, I think because I'm over my time, I'm going to stop there. But thank you, Christian, for answering some of those questions, and maybe we can get through it maybe later after Q&A. Thanks.
Great. Oh, I love the like phone a friend, phone a colleague approach. Thank you both. That was excellent. So now I'll turn it over to Vanessa Castro, San Mateo County Office of Education. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa. I'm with the County Office of Education, or I'm sorry, the San Mateo County Office of Education Safe Routes to School. And I'm going to be talking about how we use a data-driven approach to really focus our Safe Routes work to the schools that have the highest needs. Am I doing this right? Okay, sorry, I'm new to all this technology. So just a little bit about the report that we did. We teamed up with Get Healthy San Mateo County, and we did this report about health and equity in transportation. And what we saw was really alarming. The schools with the highest rates of poverty were also the schools that experienced the highest rate of collisions within half a mile of the school. So that was really alarming, and we really wanted to do something about that. I do want to point out that the high poverty neighborhoods are defined as 30% or more of residents living below 200% of the federal poverty level, which is $48,500 for a family of four. We all know how expensive it is in to live in the Bay Area, so these families are really financially burdened and experiencing the highest rate of collisions near their homes. So with the data that we got from this report, we actually used it to apply for an Office of Traffic Safety grant, which we are now in our third cycle. We've teamed up with Climate Corps to hire a Climate Corps fellow to lead the work with this and to really provide hands-on assistance to those schools identified in the report. And here's a picture of this year's fellow, Brianna Thurman. I think she's here today. I hope she's here. Hi, Brianna. So I do want to highlight one specific school because Woodrow Wilson Elementary in Daly City actually experienced the highest rate of crashes within their half-mile radius. And they are faced with several burdens. A little over 68% of their students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Close to 64% of their students are English language learners. So we're already seeing language and income burdens that the families are experiencing. And a lot of families actually live on the other side of John Daly Boulevard over here. So not only are they experiencing these other kind of burdens in their lives, but a lot of them do walk to school and they have to cross a 6-lane road, which, as I'm sure you can tell just by the screenshot I put up there, is very car-centric. And another thing that you've probably already noticed based on the screenshot, there's really limited green space for kids to play there. And it's been pretty much acknowledged that families don't feel safe going to the nearby parks. And besides that, there really isn't an option for kids to be kids. So thanks to the wonderful principal at Woodrow Wilson Elementary, we were able to team up with several and many more partners than what's on the screen to really work together and support the families and support Safe Routes to School. So we worked with Faith in Action for Parent Volunteers, Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, the UC Cooperative Extension, Daly City has been a wonderful partner in all this work, and many, many more. So I want to thank the principal for really acknowledging and recognizing that we need to work together for these communities, because in my experience, a lot of times there's all these partnerships in place, but we all kind of work in our little silos and don't necessarily interact. So I think this was key to the success of Safe Routes to School at Woodrow Wilson. And I do want to highlight some of the events that we were able to, I guess, collaborate on with various partners. Safetyville, it's a really great program from Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. They come in and they do, I think, 3 or 4 weeks of curriculum with the kids about pedestrian safety. And on the final week, they actually get to test their skills with Safetyville, that picture you see on the upper right-hand corner. And I do want to point out that Daly City PD has been a wonderful partner in all of this. And I want to acknowledge that although Safe Routes to School has removed enforcement from the 6 E's, the way law enforcement worked in this community is really collaborative and really all about engaging in a positive way with the kids. And we're really grateful for that partnership and for really building positive relationships with law enforcement in this community. We've also done a walk audit there, which was also very transformative for the community. We actually had to appeal to the parent volunteers there. Most of them are monolingual Spanish speakers, so we made sure to provide translation services and made sure they had somebody who spoke Spanish and was able to translate for them so that they can express their concerns in a language that they felt comfortable in. And if you look at the bottom of the picture, you see the kids in their yellow caps. They're the safety patrol. They led the way and they shared their concerns as well. So the walk audit was really learning it from the community and the people who experience the traffic hazards every day, telling us their experiences. And that picture on the right, that's actually our group crossing John Daly Boulevard. And what was really great about this walk audit, we had some really quick turnaround improvements. The pedestrian phase on John Daly Boulevard, actually, thanks to Daly City, they were able to add seconds to that. So not only did it increase safety for families who already walked, we're hoping that it maybe encourage more people to start walking to school. And lastly, since COVID-19 and shelter in place kind of took over our lives, we were really kind of grappled with how are we going to continue to engage families in Safe Routes to School. And our principal, Sarah Rich, she mentioned, well, hey, Second Harvest Food Bank is here every first Saturday of the month. It would be really great if you can connect with the families there because a lot of people are food insecure. So you will have a lot of people there. We put together these fun little safety activity kits with the Safe Routes to School book with coloring crayons and some high visibility slap bands and zipper pools to encourage people to keep walking, keep staying active, but reminding them to stay safe. And it was really well received. And I think this is something especially now that a lot of school districts are going to be going back into into distance learning this school year, something that we want to continue to do to engage families. And we have a message from the principal herself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Rich, the principal of Woodrow Elementary School. We love Safe Routes to School. We kind of didn't know how amazing Safe Routes to School was going to be. It completely revolutionized our school. Through our partners Safe Routes, we did a walk audit of our whole neighborhood. Our parents walked and told us what they needed in order to feel safer walking to school. It was one of those moments as a principal that I thought, wow, we're gonna do something good for our families. And since then, we've changed our crosswalk, we've made it safer, we've added in for strollers so they can walk through. All of this happened because Safe Routes brought us together with the county office, with the city, with government officials. All I know is that my school is safer, happier, kids are more engaged, kids have leadership roles because of Safe Routes to School. Hi, I'm Sarah.
Sorry. That was just a quick message from her, and I'm so sad to say this, but she is actually moving on from Woodrow Wilson after the school year. So we're really going to miss Sarah. She did a lot of the work to bring us all these community partners together, but she laid such a strong foundation for Safe Routes to School. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to continue this trajectory of wonderful projects. And I'm happy to say, I mean, this isn't necessarily Safe Routes related, but the campus now has a turf lawn on their blacktop, which has made a huge difference to the community. Kids now have green space to play in after school and on the weekends, which has totally transformed the school. And the San Mateo County Transportation Authority recently awarded them infrastructure funding to build a bike path on their campus so that kids can have a safe place to learn to ride a bike and just to practice their bike safety skills. And I think that's it for me. Thank you, everybody.
Excellent. Thanks, Vanessa. I love the testimonial. We need more of those. Well, this is wonderful. So we're going to shift in this Equity and Safe Routes to School panel. We have about 15 minutes for question and answer. And I've seen a few questions come into the chat box, so I'll bring those back to the panelists to respond. And I just wanted to kick it off. I think this conversation that I've heard woven through everyone's presentations around translation in your work, and whether that's explicitly translating into another language to reduce language barriers, or as I think a lot of you are talking about, is that kind of just being one step, but there's a lot of other tools to more abstractly translate bigger planning concepts and think about how that can shift power and transfer power in the room. So I wanted to bring that back to the panelists, this idea of translation. I think I've seen it kind of captured other people's interest in the chat as well. And if you all could just talk a little bit around what translation means in your work.
I'll go first.
James, you want to?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Most of my work is, I worked at MTA in Los Angeles. We would have meetings with maybe 50 Latino families, 50 Latino people, and wouldn't say a word, even with translation. So it's hard to get people the right tools to express themselves is more important. So with Latinos, I would put out materials and they would build their ideal rail line or ideal bike path. But the actual using their hands is a way of communicating to everybody else what they wanted. And that was a really safe and easy, simple way for them to work. So since then, I've been really thinking about how we communicate with the tools we use is really critical. And we have to go beyond just words. Because words are very limiting. Words can't express an emotion and feeling. Where if somebody builds their safe route to school with yellow flowers and purple trees, now you have an emotion tied to it. And now you're expressing more than just words. So it's really important to get people to express feelings and emotions through our tools. So I find that art making is the best way to really capture these really deep emotions people have for space and how to really turn an intangible into a tangible.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Does anyone else on the panel want to talk about some of the role of translation? Go ahead, Vanessa.
It might be a little bit of an offshoot, but I do want to acknowledge that when we were working with the parent volunteers, they were all primarily Spanish-speaking mothers. And I think working with Faith in Action was super beneficial because they've already kind of developed their group and they have their commitment with Faith in Action. But I still had to go in and kind of make the case for getting involved in Safe Routes. It wasn't something that they were just kind of handed off or told, like, you need to go to this, which I've seen happen from time to time. I actually had to present to them and make the case and tell them why I thought it was important that they became involved in Safe Routes to School. And once I was out of the room, they collectively made the decision to support this program, which I think was really important because it was something that they chose to do, not something that they were handed off or told to do by the principal or the organization. And I think that was really instrumental in just giving them kind of that sense of decision-making power in what they decide to get involved in.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example.
Hey, yeah, I think for me, when I was going back to that example of when I was at Alta Planning and I did the site assessment in Oakland, in the past, it was just very important for me to let the families, especially the Spanish-speaking mothers, know that I speak Spanish, because it just broke that tension, or at least the nodding effect that I was talking about is usually folks just kind of, it's like, oh, you're talking, and they're just like, and you think you're getting through to them, but in reality, they don't know unless you let them know that you speak Spanish. And once I did that, they were, man, the floodgates open. They just started talking about everything that was a problem. So it's truly important. I think in addition, James Rojas talks about just the material, but I also think even trying to experience riding a bike on a bike lane is something else differently and very important. because it gives that sort of confidence that you can do these things. You can bike, and then, which is even more important, you're able to pass that down to somebody else who isn't very confident when it comes to riding a bike.
That's a great point. Joelle, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add briefly on, I would say, like, beyond just translating to, you know, for us, it's primarily Spanish. There's also a degree of like looking at like cultural relevance and making sure that the translated materials aren't just translated universally. So we work across the Bay Area, and, you know, we might have two schools with the same proportion of Spanish speakers, but the materials that those students create at each school are completely different. And that's something that we found that students know better than almost anyone. You know, maybe one school, what's going to work is a humorous video that the students film, and that's going to be what's relatable and applicable. And in another school, it's going to be like educational flyers translated in Spanish. And so I think it's just, it goes beyond just like linguistic translation, but also looking at like local cultural considerations and taking into account what students or, you know, young people or even community activists say is going to be, you know, compelling and culturally relevant.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, this is like almost going to sound like blasphemy or something, but I just remember, not just remember, but I didn't learn how to ride a bike until graduate school. I come from Los Angeles, and for me, using that story with families, especially Spanish-speaking families, man, it does things for them. They're like, you had an issue? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't know. I lived in LA. I, you know, grew up in LA, born in LA, and my parents did not let me go out and ride a bike. And so when I learned that in graduate school, I mean, it changes your experience. It changes the relationship and conversations you have with folks, even if they're not Spanish speakers. Really just kind of builds this trust with them, and it just makes it a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Well, I'm going to pull from a couple of questions that have been coming in, and the first one is actually for Jose. What is being done for students still in East Palo Alto? How are parents, city staff, and decision makers being engaged there? And there's a comment that biking for kids in most parts of the city is absolutely harrowing. So Jose, I'll turn it over to you if you want to give a little response.
Yeah, so, you know, we work closely related we can with East Palo Alto. Since we are Palo Alto, we're not working with other people within East Palo Alto besides the PAUSD student and family engagement specialist. And we're actually trying to kind of connect a lot with East Palo Alto because that connection, you know, we have some sort of relationship, but I definitely, that's why I'm there new starting back in November 2019, was to kind of continue building this relationship with East Palo Alto and kind of seeing what tools are available, the groups that are available, so we ensure that we're bringing everybody together. Especially right now, we're working on a Safe Routes to School equity plan, and this is actually what I'm doing right now, is trying to figure out what's available, what tools are there, working with Christian Munoz, who we were just talking to not so long ago, and building that relationship with him to ensuring that even now with COVID and post-COVID, we continue to build this relationship to ensure that folks in East Palo Alto have the available resources to maybe get a bike, also to learn some important information and reach out to kids, especially through the VTP program or the Volunteer Transfer Program, to ensure that they know all the stuff they need to know about safety regarding bicycle safety. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, looking forward to seeing some of that. The next question that I see, this is a long one, but let's see if I can try to summarize it. How can folks in the private sector get better with operationalizing these equity methods with public clients and making sure that engagement is kind of ongoing? And it seems like Alyssa is especially asking about new residents and new students that are maybe moving in as the planning process is happening. And I know none of you are explicitly from the private sector, but I know kind of work across private, public, and nonprofit, and maybe can speak to kind of operationalizing as this question is asking. Is there someone who wants to pick that up?
Yeah, I'll try it. I work a lot with the private sector, and I think it's difficult because I think for me, I just come in there, I set the tone, and set the goals of the project, and for me, it's all about creating self-determination within the community. As a planner, I think half our job is to really put the onus on the participants in the community to move the plan forward. So it's really critical for us to go in there as the private sector and say, we're not here to give you a plan, we're here to really make your plan move forward, wherever that plan is. So really kind of put the emphasis on the community. Therefore, we're teaching them how to fish, not giving them the fish. So I think far too often the private sector, we go in there, we do a fancy plan and leave. And then 10 years later, the plan got nowhere. So it's really kind of thinking about how do we embed the community's knowledge in these plans so they're the leaders of the plan. As the private sector, we could play an important role in that because we get hired by cities to do these plans, and we can do it good, or we can really introduce new methods of planning that maybe the city can't do. So yes, I think for us, it's really kind of letting as private sector, really encouraging self-determination amongst the participants of the community to move forward the plan rather than just doing the whole plan for them.
Yeah, and if I could,
That's a great point.
I mean, I agree with everything that James said. And I hate to say it, but sometimes engagement and outreach kind of does feel like checking a box sometimes, where you go to a certain number of events and talk to a certain number of people, when I really do think it needs to be the foundation of any project. And just remembering that the community that you're working in, they're the experts. They're the ones who know what they need. They experience this every day. So it should be embedded throughout the project. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, and people won't always want to talk to you. But it's just so important to, I mean, not only to have their support, but to just really understand what they're going through every day.
Yeah, and also give them the privilege to say, this is you're going to implement this plan. So it's a part about you. It's a part about you every day going out there and doing this plan. So it's not just going to sit in itself, it's going to sit in their minds and their everyday behavior patterns. I did a workshop 5 years ago in Phoenix, Arizona, with a group of people with disabilities. The city just built a beautiful station for them. There's a rail line next to it, but no rail stop. They did a workshop, built their ideal station for people with disabilities. They were excited about what they built. For 5 years, they lobbied the city to get a rail stop built for them. They finally got it built. This is the first rail stop in the country, built by people with, really pushed by people with disabilities. So again, that's the kind of legacy we should be leaving in these communities, that they're going to pick up the slack once we're gone.
Yeah, I think I hear you all talk about kind of the follow through and accountability back to the people that you're serving and working with. And Joelle, I didn't think I heard you talk about it in your presentation around, interviewing and, giving surveys to youth and asking what they want to see, and then coming back to it to make sure that, the work isn't empty promises, and that you have kind of like an accountability loop pulled into that. Great. I'm going to turn to another question. This might be the last one of the session. And this is from a panelist or from a member asking, instead of translating a meeting into the community's first language, do you have thoughts about holding the meeting in the first language and translating it into English? So maybe, for example, hosting a workshop or a meeting in Spanish and then translating into English if needed. Has anyone had experience with that or can reflect on that?
I do a lot of Spanish speaking workshops because it's a really simple process. And, and since we're not trying to give people information but create knowledge, it's about what they build, which has become the knowledge. And it's a really simple way of, words aren't essential. It's just more what they build in their actions, and they can summarize them really quickly. So most of my workshops I'll do with all Spanish speaking people.
For me, it's just all about comfort and welcoming folks, especially people, Spanish speakers. And, for me, I'm very fluent and feel very natural speaking to, anybody who needs to speak in Spanish, and just building that level of trust is, I think, vital. Not everybody can do that. I understand that part, but that's why I encourage a lot of people to work with like nonprofits or programs that are provided by the Unified School District, like we have the SAFE program, to ensure that they're able to reach out and talk. Because again, there are a lot of Spanish-speaking families, for example, that when it comes to even coming to these meetings, there's just not enough time. The ability to move around, especially coming from different areas, for example, in the Bay Area, to make it to a meeting is really hard. Again, talking about Zooming and connecting online is really difficult as well, because they just don't have, either they haven't connected or a router or Wi-Fi. They don't know how to navigate to a Zoom page. So participation is crucial. And now with COVID, I think it's even harder for people who just don't have those abilities to access. So it's really important to figure out these ways to build the bridges to ensure that we get people just involved as much as possible, even through COVID.
One way too is also have the family work as one unit. Sometimes when I do workshops, I'll have the whole Rodriguez family at one table planning their ideal street, or the whole Garcia family working together. So the parents and the kids are all in this together. And when I tell planners, Spanish-speaking parents gonna trust their kids more for the translation than you. So it's really important to have children, in the room as well, because now the parents feel that they're part of a bigger system, and they're also educating their kids to be civic leaders too, in that same kind of. So I try to really craft venues that are very family friendly. I tell people, bring your kids. I want to see them at this meeting. Plus, when you have kids in the room, adults tend to act a little better. They're more well behaved.
And if I
Definitely.
could just add really quickly, I think, I am fortunate that I speak enough Spanish that I can communicate effectively with Spanish-speaking community members. But I think also as a presenter, don't go in like the professional, like expert on everything. Like show a little bit of vulnerability, and that's really helped me really get the message across and really build those relationships that are so foundational. My Spanish isn't perfect, and I acknowledge that right away. I'm like, hey, I'm going to try my best and I'm going to speak Spanish, but I might say I trip up on my words a little bit. And honestly, they appreciate that kind of vulnerability and honesty in my experience. So I think it is a little bit of it's kind of like a relationship. You work on it, you build on it, you bring vulnerability to it.
Yeah, it's all about the messenger.
Excellent.
I just want to quickly say, because also we talk about youth a lot, and I just want to mention that for me when I was a kid and I was in high school, what did it for me for what I'm doing now was the fact that there was a program through LA Metro that was run called the Transportation Careers Academy. And if it wasn't for that program, I would not be where I am today. So I encourage a lot of, just to reach out to, especially when you're reaching out to young folk, is just making sure that they know that these careers exist. There are people, visibility of color, who do the work as well. And, I really enjoy it, and I try to emphasize it as much as possible from any age, that, you can make a career out of this, and it's great.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists, James, Vanessa, Joelle, and Jose. I think I have to wrap this up. There was just a great question from Shiloh that I wanted to maybe leave the panelists and the audience with, even though we won't have time to talk about it. How do we break through the mindset of public agencies and not viewing the community as an asset? I know we have probably a lot to say on that, but again, I wanted to thank the panelists and just remind everyone here that these are people who are a great community asset to reach out to and thinking about equity and safe routes to school work. And I think that they would all be open to kind of having further conversations. So with that, I'll turn it back to Tim, I guess, to wrap this up.